Bismillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah sallallahu. Welcome to the al-Madaar podcast. I'm your host Ismail Howell. And today we're discussing a very, very important topic, dealing with racism in the Ummah. And over the last few months, we've seen different people tackling the issue online and in lectures. I think it's only poignant that we actually, as a community centre, we deal with this issue. So today we have two guests. We have the founder of al-Madaar Center, Muawiyah Taka. He's a graduate from Medina, from the Department of Sharia, and he's been teaching and lecturing for over 10 years. We also have Abdul Haq Ashanti, mashallah, who has a master's in the history of Islam in Africa. He's written several books and has been researching and translating for around 20 years. So brothers, we have a serious topic at hand that we need to discuss. How do you tackle racism in the Ummah? We'll start with yourself, Ustad Muawiyah.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Now it's a very important topic about the issue of racism because it's something that no one is ignorant of. Everyone feels it at some level. Obviously some would feel it less than others. And the repercussions or the ramifications of racism as it relates to our daily earnings of income and social integration, marriage, divorce, how our kids are raised. It's almost every faculty of life. We have these difficulties we have to deal with. So I think it's important to discuss what it is, what does Islam have to say about it, and what solutions does Islam offer? Because I think most people, we can't just discuss that it's there. We know it's there. We need to know what are the solutions for it. Is there a solution for it in the first place? Can it ever even be remedied in the first place? That kind of thing. I mean, it's a wide topic. So, I mean, I'm not sure if Sheikh Abdul Haq has any tafsil on the issue.
بسم الله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Very interesting topic. I'm not sure, definitely we're not going to be able to cover all of it today.
It's a big topic. This is probably the first of many parts to deal with it. So as an introduction, how can we summarize the issue right now and how other people are trying to deal with it and how we can kind of help?
Yeah, there are a few points to this. I'd say firstly, racism, as it has manifested itself, is a complete anathema to Islam. It's something which Islam does not condone whatsoever. However, there are unfortunately we do find among Muslims racism, and not just racism, but we also find discrimination, hatred, colorism, and all of these factors we find unfortunately among Muslims, and all of this is totally contrary to what Islam teaches us.
Okay,
the Quran, for example, Allah mentioned in the Quran, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافَ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. Here Allah mentions that from His signs is that He's created the heavens and the earth, and also in the differences in your colours and your different tongues, meaning languages, and indeed in that is a sign for the people, for the worlds. So even though Islam, and also the Prophet mentioned, بَعِثْتُ لَكُلِّ أَسْوَدٍ وَأَحْمَرٍ, I was sent to every black and red, meaning I was sent to everybody. But we do find ignorance among Muslims, unaware of what Islam actually does say. Or when Muslims are aware of it, the reality of implementing it is somewhat deficient among many Muslims. So this is what we find today in terms of this kind of what Islam says. How it could be remedied and dealt with, as like what the brother Muawiyah said, it's education. That's the first thing. Education on not just what Islam says, but also looking at the societal impacts of racism, and how that can impact different communities as well. All of that has to be assessed.
Now, what examples do we have during time processing where issues of racism occurred and he dealt with it swiftly and clearly? Do you have any examples, Sheikh Mara?
I mean, before the examples, this is something that I tried to touch upon in a lecture I delivered in Newcastle Uni, in the ISOC there, is what is racism in the first place? Because we may include things in the banner of racism, and we may exclude things in the banner of racism. Whereas Islam doesn't say don't be racist. Islam says don't be something. What is this something? This I think it should be the first question. Before we say examples of racism in Islam or in the Sunnah, what is the thing that Islam, or what is Islam? What is racism as we know it today? Because when I looked at the research into different definitions, there were many different definitions.
Yes.
So I'm going to probably open that one up. I mean, what do you have to say about the definition of racism? And
well, the definition of racism is to treat differently, detrimentally, another person or persons merely on account of their ethnic or racial background.
Yeah. So on that definition, which is one of many, we see from that, if you analyze it, for example, the issue of treating someone badly. Whereas I may say, if I want to promote someone who's Jamaican, then I am favouring someone based on their race. And some may...
Not necessarily. You can have Chinese Jamaican or...
No, I'm just... it's true. But I'm just saying is that if you try to define what racism is, in practice, we find a lot of things are called racism that doesn't fit our definitions, or things are even excluded in it that I would say should be included. Based on that, so for example, it can't be just the issue of treating badly, because we have examples of the Sunnah of the woman who's Makhzumiyah. She was the tribe Makhzumi, and she had been accused of stealing. So they tried to intercede on her because she was Makhzumi. It's like, how can you cut the hand off a Makhzumi? It's like, you know, she's not any old person, she's Makhzumi.
Yes.
And the famous statement, if Fatima bint Muhammad stole, I will cut her hand off myself.
Yeah.
So it wasn't treating anyone badly, actually. It was actually saying, well, because she's of a certain lineage, we should treat her better. Yes. So again, we would have to adjust our definition of racism. It can't be treating badly. Or another one definition is to, which includes both good and bad, is to empower or remove rights from the angle of power. So if government or institutions that have power to implement things, if they try to favor or disregard a person, that's an example of racism. And again, I find a problem with that because it seems to only refine to those with power and exclude those who may not have power. Or some may say, okay, what level of power are we talking about? Because if a person goes to marry someone or approaches a brother to marry his daughter and the issue of race comes into play, the father hasn't got power, but he does have power over the decision. Yes. So it's a...
That's a good point, because I remember when this whole issue came up over the last couple of years with regards to an incident which occurred with somebody who made a statement which was deemed as racist. What my brother mentioned to me was, yeah, but why are some of the brothers deeming that as racist? Because it's not really racist, because those people don't have access to, they haven't got the access to the reins of power. So kind of like, so what the brother was trying to say to me was that racism, as you alluded to, can only be committed by those people who have access to the reins of power. If you don't have the reins of power, then you can't be racist, which is a little bit it's not fully. Let me be diplomatic. That's not fully the case.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're saying that to discriminate to someone, you've got to either be able to oppress them, withhold something from them, put them in a particular situation.
But it doesn't mean necessarily that you're in a power, in a governmental power position to do that, which is kind of like what the brother was trying to say to me, that's the only time where racism can be committed. So those people who enter in those positions of power, then they can, by the very virtue of that, they cannot be racist, which is nonsense.
So we can agree that issue of racism can be done by anyone at any place. It's not a case of whether they have power or not.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, that's what I'm saying. From if going by the definitions given by, I would say the non-Muslims, be honest, because these definitions are not defined by Muslims specifically, as far as I'm aware. They're defined by it's a discord which takes place mainly in Western arenas. So if you want to look at it from an Islamic perspective, I find a better definition, or an Islamic definition, would be Jahiliyyah. Acts of Jahiliyyah, which would encompass all faculties or all elements that Islam warns against and gives solutions for. So in Jahiliyyah, it refers to pre-Islamic behavior. And this is why I always advise people, if you want to actually discuss the issue of Jahiliyyah, I advise you to read the poems of the Jahil Arabs, the Arabs before Islam, or just at the cusp of Islam. The Mu'allaqat. If you see how they were boastful of their tribe, putting down other tribes, talking about their feeling prideful of things that was not, as in like one poet said, when we go to a land, we're the one who decides who has this and who has that. We prevent things and we can allow things. When they go to water, we get the clean water and others get the dirty water. He was talking about we as in our tribe. And this fakhr, this showing off of ansab, showing off of your lineage, is at the root core of all forms of jahiliyyah, which I would say is our discussion here. Fakhr bil ansab, wa ta'an fil ansab, showing off of your own lineage and putting down others for their lineage. And if you just summarize it as that, I think you'd find a lot of people who, even speakers who wave the flag of racism, exactly do that same thing. They have fakhr for a nasab and ta'a for a nasab. And so if you look at, first thing, look at the Jahiliyyah, how they behaved, and then look at Islam, how the shift happened. They still had boastfulness. They still had ta'an, putting other people down, but it wasn't based on nasab anymore. It was based on deen.
So if you kind of summarize that, if Muslims are looking for a solution for racism within the Ummah, they've got to use Islamic definition.
They have to use it, because the thing is, you have to look, for example, some things may be considered racist.
Yes.
The Islam doesn't actually say there's anything wrong with it. So for example, maybe I would favor someone, for example, look at the example of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who one of the Sahabi who was carrying the flag towards the Battle of Mecca, and he said some statement, I can't remember the exact statement, but saying there's going to be humiliation today against Quraysh. I said, no, there's going to be izzah. But he took the flag off of him, but gave it to his son. Now, if I said that to a Western speaker or not, they might say, this is nepotism. Why are you giving it to his son? You should go to the next person who's deserving of this.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So there are elements where Islamically speaking, it's nothing wrong with it, but in modern day arenas, it would be wrong with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, even the classic example of leadership, I'm Khalifa, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and I've chosen that the next one in line is my son.
Yes.
Now, the first answer will be, this is kingship. But the question is that haram what I just did? You know what I'm saying? So, I'm just saying that when we discuss the issue of racism, I think it's very important that we stay within the guidelines of what Islam says is wrong, and don't use terminologies that murky the issue. It makes the issue unclear.
We want a clear Islamic solution for the
It's not just a solution, but a clear Islamic problem to deal with. If I choose the word racism, what am I actually dealing with? I don't know.
Okay.
It's unclear to me. Even with the English definition on the various definitions, I'm not clear what you mean. Is it being racist? I don't know.
Okay, so under the definition of Jahiliyyah, how can we deal with this issue? By habit, I'm going to use the term racism again.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you understand it, and how do we move forward in dealing with the issue?
I mean, sure, I can give many more examples, but I mean, I'll give one example. This issue of fakhr fil ansab, being proud.
Yes.
Of your nasab. I had one brother came across and said, I'm proud to be Somali. And I wanted to try and agitate him, just to wind him up a bit, whilst making him think. So I said to him, what's it to be proud of? Just like that.
Yeah.
Not saying I hate Somalis or anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, just wanted to get him to think, what did you just say there? I'm proud to be Somali. I said to him, what are you proud of? So I'm proud to be Somali. And I was born in Somali and blah, blah. I said, but yeah, but that's not had enough to do with you. You didn't choose to be Somali. You landed in that body you are, in that family you're in. Pride is of achievements, what you do. So what did you achieve by being Somali? Here already, being proud to be black, be proud to be white, be proud to be Chinese. What's there to be proud of? You are just a human being.
Can we separate, for example, if we say I'm proud to be Somali, maybe because the achievements of Somalia or what it's done for the world, is that a reason to be proud of it, or is it just because I'm Somalia? What is the?
But again, in Islam, and this is where if you look at the Sunnah, I think it becomes clear. The Messenger of Allah rewarded or not based on what people did.
Yes.
And this is at the core of Islam.
So yeah, Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti in Adwa al-Bayan, he elucidates what you noted earlier about there being like this it's like archetypal meritocracy. It's what you kind of described there, about how many of the early A'imma and ulama from the Salaf were actually from the freed slaves, the Mawali. So despite them coming from backgrounds which they had slave origins, that Islam there was no barrier within Islam to prevent them from scholarship and then going on to become illustrious scholars in the Muslim era. So yeah, that's a good point as well. That Islam does incorporate intrinsically a meritocracy.
I mean, it sounds like, obviously, we just use the example of the brother from Somalia being proud of his roots. The fact that we have nation states now, and everyone now has become nationalistic, okay? Is that allowed or not, and how is that at the root that I'm going to say, okay, I'm from this land, you're from that land, I'm better than you because of a so-called border in between us. I've now got Israel, you haven't. So is that the root of it, nationalism, issue of racism?
I mean, definitely at
Or is it a different layer? Because obviously you've got the colour issue and then you've got obviously the national issue.
I mean, I'll definitely say that if you look at the Sunnah, you find that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave roles to those who were deserving of the roles, and then asked them, "Oh, I can't give you this one because you're X, Y, and Z, and because you're that." Whether Salman al-Farisi, he was in need, he rallied everyone to go to his need to help him free himself. And other situation, you find that you don't find this, as in you find that as Allah said, لِتَعَارَفُوا, that lineage or nationality or nation states. Yeah, so it's لِتَعَارَفُوا is a mechanism, or our jinsiyya is a way to know, okay, a brother spoke to me the other day and he gave me and he hit me. Where can I find him? Oh, what do you know about him? Oh, the Somali brother. So I've defined him as a Somali brother to help me find who this person is.
Yes, got you.
But let me flip it on the other end. Same scenario. You know, I saw some person the other day it looked a bit shady. You know, and someone might say to you, "Oh, what were they?" Now that question, I often ask people, "Why did you ask me that?" Because I can only what color were they? What were they? So if I called the police and said, "Oh, someone is acting shady," to ask what they are, it makes sense because I need to look for them.
Yes.
But if I'm just talking in discussion about something happening, an event happened, and someone got ripped off by someone else, that's the scenario. I met a brother. He bought a laptop from someone on the street and he got ripped off. And someone says, "Oh, were they gypsy?" For example. Now, there's only one or two things you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's only one or two reasons why you ask that. One, to confirm a stereotype you've already had in your head, or two, to build one. Now, both of these two things are useless because I can't use that information in any meaningful way. Because if I meet another person who's a gypsy, does that mean that they are that person? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I only see one useful element of knowing about a person's lineage or background, and that is ta'arufu, as Allah mentioned it. But on the other ayah, we have تِلْكَ أُمَّةٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ لَهَا مَا كَسَبَتْ وَلَكُمْ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ. That as a nation is already gone. For them, what they earn, for what you earn. وَلَا تُسْأَلُونَ عَمَّا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. And you won't be asked about what they did. So yeah, I'm proud to be X, Y, and Z because they did X, Y, and Z. MashaAllah, they did do X, Y, and Z, then that's really good for them. May Allah reward them for what they did. But I need to know about you, brother. What have you done? And are you a good person? Are you a bad person? If you're a good person, I treat you well. If you're a bad person, I treat you accordingly. And this should be the only criterion of mu'amala. The problem is when our criterion is no longer what a person is or does, it's about what their forefathers have done. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think this is at the root of all problems. I'm now making the basis of my interaction with someone not based on what you did, but based on what they did. It's like when I was, before I was Muslim, I used to be black nationalist. I used to hate white people. I used to blame them for everything.
Yes.
And the basis was that their forefathers did X, Y, and Z. And yes, they did. But they didn't. So what basis do I have to hate this person for something that they had no decision in the process? If they were in the position, they wouldn't even do that. Actually, it makes it even worse. It's worse the fact that they didn't do it. Given the chance, they probably wouldn't do that. They wouldn't go to another country and grab someone and put them in shackles and put them on a ship, and they wouldn't even do that. It's not something. Not to mention, I know people probably get upset with this statement, but not to mention that if someone has an issue with slavery, the only nations who've actually gone about to ban it globally were the same nations that are being hated for it. As in, it was not like...
That's true, yeah.
It's not like anyone in Africa raised a flag and we should ban slavery. I'm not saying that... don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on anybody. I'm just saying, if you're going to hate someone for enslaving them, then where's the double standard from the same people who try to do opposite?
However, I think though with that example, if they were in the position, they probably wouldn't do it. You can't really use that because that was kind of quite time specific. It was something which was a widespread practice in the past, which was kind of seen as being wholly acceptable at that time.
Exactly, yeah.
So whereas now that people got different sensibilities and mores, and that wouldn't really be deemed as acceptable now. But maybe at that particular time and context, maybe I think slavery was in that time was something which was kind of similar to a kind of you could say like a cheap labor kind of scenario that you have in the modern world. So it was kind of similar to that, so in that context. But yeah, what you mentioned as well is a good point as well, Mario, about how, and this is what I said like when at the event in Newcastle, what I was trying to emphasize was that, and something which we probably no doubt we will elaborate further, is how Muslims have to be kind of but it's to do with like a lack of, as I said, education. Maybe a lot of Muslims are not aware of these details, because it's quite a niche kind of field. But there are instances in history, Islamic history, which are very could be very uncomfortable for many Muslims to deal with. But the reality is that they occurred, so we kind of have to like deal with them. So like what Muawiyah said is a case in point with regards to slavery, that those I mean we don't find, like I had a discussion in 2007 with a Christian academic called Dr. Anthony McCroy. It's still on YouTube, I think. It was about Islam and slavery. And Dr. McCroy was saying to me, but there's never been an abolitionist movement in the Muslim world. I said, that's true. However, that wasn't necessarily deemed as being necessary, because within Islam there was already a system by which someone who was enslaved could, gain a freedom by mukataba contract, for example. So there was already that in place anyway. But there was never that, but there was still kind of there was that sort of system as well. So that's something which as well many like. So for example, you always hear the simplistic narrative which is put out by many Muslims, where they say, but we have so and so who was black, and Islam freed the slave. That's very simplistic. You hear that a lot, actually. It's quite simplistic for Muslims to regurgitate that kind of narrative uncritically, because that's not fully the case, because there were also instances in Islamic history wherein Muslims did participate fully in slavery, and then even went to ghulu in slavery, as we found.
Just for the sake of anyone else doesn't know, what's ghulu?
Exaggeration and surpassed the bounds with regards to slavery. All of this was done, though. However, all of the people who were involved in this, however, were unable to according to research that I have conducted, quite extensive into this. None of them were able to bring the book, the Quran or the Sunnah, to justify it, which did happen in the Christian world. That was done. We had the Dutch Reformed Church and bishops in Liverpool and Southampton. And Bristol trying to bring the book to justify. You never had that in Islam where someone tried to bring the book to this. In fact, this is all done contrary to what the Quran stipulates.
Can we say that there was a period of time at the beginning of Islam where the issue of Jahiliyyah was removed from the Ummah? Then after centuries, people returned back to Jahiliyyah. You can't say that, okay, well, from the beginning, because they say that, Islam didn't come to abolish Islam. There was a period of time where people
abolished slavery.
Yeah, well, slavery. Do you understand? So over a period of time, there was ways slaves could either buy their freedom or by birth they was born free. Yeah,
it's like one of them. Some of the Mashaykh I've asked about it, like Sheikh Mashur, he mentioned once about in Jordan. He said that Islam is not pleased with slavery, but Islam arrived wherein slavery was already, the zeitgeist of the day. Yeah. So, but Islam not pleased with it, but it had to deal within it, with it, but it was not pleased with it, and it wasn't seen as being sort of that which it was becoming for an individual to be in that state.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that topic is a huge topic, and inshallah we're going to get to it. So I'm going to go back to the issue of racism. Yeah, so the point I'll mention is, where I got into the issue of the racism, was that if you look at the Muslims, who in this country predominantly are people of colour, various shades, and they always look at white people as being racist, fair be. I mean, it is fair game. There are many white people who are racist, but one thing which is why I mentioned the issue, the definition of people of power, is some people use that definition to say, well, we can't be racist because ethnic minorities have no power. And on that same excuse, they come out of all forms of racism in their behavior, in their statement, and blah, blah, blah. For example, I just had a debate with someone the other day when he said, I will never marry a white person. I said, why not? Oh, because they're this and they're that. And I said, but... He said something so-called negative.
Yeah.
Or was it just a preference?
No, it wasn't actually it's not like a preference, because even a preference...
You say it was negative.
It was negative. I'm not with the issue. But my point was, I said, but look, I don't deny a personal preference, but you've now made a qa'ida out of it. You've now made a principle out of it, whereby before even finding out if the person is good or bad for you, whether they have a good character or bad character, you've already said no at the door. Now, preference is preference.
Yes.
I mean, those preferences can change based on personality, based on experiences and whatnot. But a form of racism is exactly that. You've made a judgment call on a whole qawm.
Preconceived. It's made a preconceived judgment.
Can we not just say,
as in, for example,
I don't find this particular qawm attractive.
I have a problem. That's a good point. I've heard that before. I like one brother said to me, no, it's just how I see it. I view beauty on account of the lightness of a person. I thought, I was like, no, hold on, okay, you might like that, but you cannot say that is like that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because
you know what I'm saying.
When I was in Medina Uni, this is one of the most funniest parts of studying. There was one brother, Algerian brother. He was actually convinced, not preference, but as in an objective reality.
That's what I'm saying.
Whiter is better. I said, no, brother, it's personal preference. You might prefer this, you might prefer that. No. It's known that whiter is better. I said, brother, I don't deny what you like, but you can't say that it's an objective reality. What a person likes is a personal thing.
And then you get to the point where, to what extent does that represent colonized thinking? Especially in Algeria's case, they were under the iron fist of French colonialism for years, and some Algerian brothers have told me that as a result of that, they have imbibed some of these notions like that.
Yeah.
So to what extent could we say, it's just colonized thinking contribute to that? Obviously, it's not necessarily the case. As I said, I spoke to someone who was a person of knowledge, very respected person of knowledge, who, again, similar to what you was again, it was it's actually a good story, actually. So he was adamant, again, that because there was a talk somewhere where he mentioned something. As actually, the story is actually the narration is actually is not authentic. Where he mentioned about Adam alayhi salam had many offspring.
Yes.
And daughter one who was white and beautiful, and the other one was black. But stop like that. So a lot of the brothers who were there were was like some of the brothers were there. Even some of the brothers I noticed were even like looking at each other. Like the brothers were not even black. Were like just looking at each other. I was thinking, yeah. Anyway, so then when it came, I was somewhere. I had the opportunity to speak to this respected
you spoke to the same
person of knowledge. Yeah, and I said, yeah, you mentioned Sheikh in the talk that I said this narration. I said, first of all, is it authentic? He said to me, Sahih. But and I did further research. It's not Sahih. And then I said, furthermore, you went on to say that one of them was white and beautiful, but the black you didn't say black and beautiful. Yeah. And then he said, he said, black isn't beautiful. I said, nah, Sheikh, because you can't say that though. because
you're in front of it.
Yeah. So I said, sure, you can't say that. I said, because this is English. I said, what could be beautiful to one person is not necessarily beautiful to another. Yeah. And I said, Shinqiti, rahimahullah, mentioned this in his tafsir, al-Bayan is in there.
Yes.
Because he refutes this, Shinqiti.
Yes.
So mashallah, Shinqiti demolishes this notion.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned that, the Sheikh then was quiet. And then I was actually then on the same night, I was actually translating for this actual person.
Same Sheikh.
Yeah, I was translating for him. Then when I came to when I came to the podium, the Sheikh said, "Mashallah Abdul Haq, wa huwa Jamil." So I was like, I told some brothers. I told some brothers in Morocco about this, and they were going, "Mashallah." And they said, "Mashallah." The Sheikh made taraja then.
No, for the sake of those who don't know what that means, can you translate what you just said there?
Yeah, so Sheikh said, yeah, because mashallah, this is Abdul Haq and he's so beautiful. So I told some brothers in Morocco, and they said, oh, mashallah, the Sheikh recanted then from the earlier stuff.
Would you put his perception?
No, but I believe that this is a case in point though, Ikhwan. Yeah. So this is like a case in point. Sometimes you kind of have to challenge certain things that you hear. Yeah. Like this. And I remember I mentioned this to another Sheikh who's non-Arab. Who's actually from somewhere in the Middle East, but not Arab. Yeah. And he said, yes, true. Sometimes you find in the Arab world they say these things like kind of like as a joke. Yes. And like it's like mockery, and it's not really acceptable.
But one of the point is that it should be challenged.
Yeah, definitely have to be challenged. I think that's why. I think that's one of the key ways to challenge it, to fight against it by challenging it.
For more of a collective challenge.
No, I wouldn't say collective. It's, but it's something, a person according to their own ability and capability. Yes. Definitely. But it definitely should be challenged. I think this is why, because sometimes people don't challenge it and they just kind of leave it. Yeah. So for example, I heard this, I've got a whole repertoire of like cases where this happened. So I was somewhere, and then there was a talk, and then the Sheikh speaking said, "Yeah, brothers, don't worry." So he's going to. So most of the brothers there were mostly, and sisters were mostly black anyway, like revert community. Yeah. So yeah, bro, don't worry, brothers. If if you marry a sister, she's not white. Don't worry about it. So then after I spoke to this respected person, goes, what does this mean? He goes, oh no, because I've seen in England so many white women.
Not Arab though. Where is he from?
No, he's Arab. So he said, I've seen so many like white women with black men. So I thought that. I go, no, but that's not on account to the fact that they think that white is necessarily beautiful. Yeah. It's due to many other things, which we not necessarily can say here. But it's not due to that. And furthermore, like with their sisters here, like blacks, how are they gonna feel to hear that kind of thing? To say that? So it's not really. So you have to challenge it. And when I mentioned it, like he was really embarrassed. So I think it's maybe something just like said, like ignorance, and there was not like much deliberation.
Also, I think there's an element, just to close the call. We got about now that you're racist, but there is an element of things which are wrong, but are so commonly heard and said that people don't even realize what they're saying half the time.
Yeah, because it's so pervasive.
That saying is not said here. If it's said here, it's challenged. But if it's said from where they're from, it's not challenged.
No, yeah. So I know another case, Medina. I'm not sure Mario was aware of this. He might have heard of it. A brother who was in Medina told me about this. That there was a white brother, who was married to from a particular East African country.
Yes.
or Horn of Africa country, and then I think they had some problems, and they went to someone, a sheikh, to ask for some advice about the issue that they had, and then this person said to the white brother, "Oh well, why do you marry these people anyway? Because then your kids will come out funny anyway."
Yeah.
This is unacceptable. This is hideous thing to say. But these things are not challenged. You know, I heard about it, so I was like saying to my brother, "Akhi, don't you say anything like, have you heard this? Don't you say anything." So I think sometimes things are not really challenged. I'm not sure if there's fear, uncomfortable. Maybe some people might even be deemed as being, will I be sort of, taken off the sunnah or be deemed, if I so it might be even things like that. It's like
So
issues become so conflated. But
now for people of the sunnah to address it and say, well, there's too many statements being said, and whether it be an individual to individual, like this is wrong, or on a bigger scale, is there a need someone to take up this topic?
I mean, what the last thing you just said there, when brother said, if you marry from that side, your kids will come out X, Y, Z. That is very telling to the whole point of discussion again.
Yeah.
And that Islam came to teach us that literally, without any exaggeration, we are all the same. I mean, again, there's another issue that I mentioned in my lecture is that we use the word racism, and the first part of that word doesn't even make sense. What word is that? Race. What makes one person one race and another person another race? What features is unique to any one race to make them something different in the first place? Height is not the one, intelligence is not the one, riches is not the one. There's no single feature that you can say one person has or one race has and no other race has that is meaningful in any particular way. So therefore, literally, as Islam teaches us, or the Islamic paradigm is that human beings are actually one thing. We are different colors.
Human race, yeah.
The human race, yes, but there aren't races. So you could say that maybe at the core of racism is to actually believe that we are actually different. And that is actually probably at the core of it. So when we say I'm from this tribe, we're from that tribe, yes, I am from this lineage or from that background, I get that. But in reality, we are all from Bani Adam, and that is at the core of the discussion. Kullukum min Adam wa Adam min Turab. If you internalize that understanding, that belief that you are actually from the same person, and that person was made from turab, from clay, dust, then that should answer all the questions. On the flip side, let's look at the flip side, where the opposite mentality would come about. The belief that we actually are different. Hinduism has a caste system, and the caste system, from its fundamental beliefs, is that each caste is made from a different part of God. So the lower caste is from his foot, the warrior caste is from the middle of the arm or not, and the Brahman caste is from the head. So you can see at the very core of their beliefs, human beings aren't actually the same.
Yeah, also there's a notion that it's based upon something called Varna.
Yeah.
Which is,
that is also
colour,
I'm saying. I'm looking at an idea of a different mindset. We believe we're from the same origin. They believe we're from different origin. Even eugenics, or even like we look at white nationalists or people who, I don't say white nationalists, because even black nationalists, even people look at who have a lot of hang-ups about race and pride. They all look at differences, how one is better,
they all concur actually. Like what he's mentioned about some of those nationalist movements from the opposing strands, actually they all kind of concur on that actually. That's why there's, in fact, in history you'll find there's been a lot of cooperation between them, because they essentially agree that that the races should be separate. So they agree upon that. They kind of have ta'awan upon that matter, that they should all
I mean, even
separate.
Nation of Islam, if you look at it, the words they use, they call the white man the devil. Now, it's not to say they're the devil because of their actions, because a white man who is born and is not evil is still the devil. Yeah. It's an inherent feature within their DNA, their genome, i.e., there is something fundamentally different about them that makes them actually different, like you have a cat-dog difference. Yeah. And you can almost say that, I would say, at the core of the solution that Islam offers is the realization that actually we aren't different. There's actually probably more differences. This is actually a fact scientifically on biological level that there can be more genetic differences within a race than between people of different races. I mean, think about it. A person has a lighter skin than another person, yet their nose is the same, for example. Whereas skin tone, in terms of genetic data or code, isn't that much. It's not like it's half his genome determines his color. So if you look at features, for example, you'd find features in West Africa, the same in terms of, like, for example, nose and lips. You might find exact same features.
But even that is questionable. Because what you said there is a case in point as well, though, Mara.
No, I'm saying
because in West Africa you find people who have who could have aquiline features. Again, you know what I'm saying?
But there you go. So I'm saying even then,
which again,
that's an example
debunks that thing as well.
Exactly, that's an example of a stereotype. So I was trying to get at, you find features that are stereotypically found in this area, also somewhere else. In another part of in Asia, like in the Philippines, you have the similar features. So
in that part of the world where you have what known as the people called the orang asli, you find in I think Malaysia and Indonesia, and maybe that part of the world who have like afro hair.
Yeah.
and so forth.
Again, or I've done these little tests with someone when I had this discussion with some of my students where I brought pictures of individuals and said, "Are they black?" And they'll say to me, "No, he's Bengali." I said, "But yet this guy is darker than this guy who you say is black."
Semantics. It comes down to semantics then.
So again, I think this is why I think, although I don't believe most people would agree with me, I don't really care, but I believe deep down that Islam teaches us that if we are debating a discussion, but yet we're still living within the confines of a language which is wrong. For example, we should stick up for black rights. Brother, this word is artificial. Black, white. As one guy, I think Jonathan Brown, he said that in American law, if you have any 1% of African DNA, you're considered to be black. No matter how white your skin is, you're still considered black. So then, therefore, we find that the word black and white is actually a political term, even.
That's interesting for the West. That's interesting for the West. That is true in the West. I'm sure you know a lot about that as well, Ismail. In the West, that is the case, though, because of that. What they call it the one drop rule. I think that anyone who had a bit of anyone is common in the Americas and the Caribbean. That if you had as you mentioned, any trace of African blood in you, that rendered the person as being black. And that's why I think that's why in the West as well, though, there are issues though with that as well, though, to be fair. That I think that's why there's also that's why there is quite strong black consciousness in the West as well, due to that. And some of that has been it's not necessarily some of it though is not necessarily negative from the aspect of it does give a kind of recognition among many people that in the Western world that I am black. Because of this, not only because of that, people were pushed to marginalised because of the dominant white European centric view that because of the one drop rule they're no longer white. So that then as well did lead to the formation of a kind of black identity and black consciousness, wherein there is a kind of you could say people do find like a value in saying that I am black, which as well that also and there are kind of there's issues
because in the case of identity, you need to identify with your people in order to have so-called a foundation in order to grow. Okay, the ideal situation is everyone's from Adam, we're all one big family, we're colourless. But in reality, it's not going to happen. You get what I'm saying? You're going to identify with people from the point of, this is my tribe, these are my people, we live together, grow together, we're history together. It's about building yourself. But then obviously, how do you stop it from falling into racism,
oppression and stuff?
Jahiliyyah? We don't live in a colourless society. We recognize there's tribes, there's yellow people, green people, whatever, right? That is a reality. So where is the overspill? Where is the exaggeration? Where does it come in? How can we stop
I definitely think that our next discussion should be to focus on identity, because what you just basically said there, because as in there's a very good point. I identify as X, Y, and Z, tribe, nationality, whatever, but how far does that identity go
To shape you, yeah.
to shape you, and how much and how far and what at what level does that identity now become wrong? I think that probably should be the next discussion, the topic of our next discussion. To be honest.
So how do you summarise it? What do you summarise? I mean, one of the first, I think, major things is that as Muslims we should look for an Islamic solution. Use Islamic terminology, as you said, Jahiliyyah, and the fact that we're all from Adam. Some people might say, okay, yeah, Adam was black, so that makes us better. You get what I'm saying? People might see it from that angle. So I think that's 2 points. Any point you like to?
I mean, another thing I would like to summarize and conclude with is saying that the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that it's one of those things that will never leave this ummah. And he never said that. I don't believe he said that just out of prophecy, as in it was prophesied it would never happen. I think there's an inherent thing about human beings that it will always be there. This idea of favoring someone for a reason. Now, Islam teaches us to favor someone based on the good they do, the salihat, and to fall out of favor someone due to the sayyi'at, the bad they do. Meritocracy, basically what he said. But meritocracy based on Islamic values of what is good and bad. That's what it should be. But at a fundamental level, we all need to acknowledge that it's an ongoing struggle for all of us. It doesn't matter how awake you are to the realities of our indoctrination to nonsense. It's something that we have to struggle with all the time. Even recently, as I'm speaking to you guys here about racism, I find myself sometimes having to readjust what I say because I've realized I've said something which was wrong. It came out because it comes out, and then in hindsight, I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. But it's just things that just happen. Like I said, the stereotypes we have. Just a minute ago, like you said, I made an example of stereotypes of West African features. You said that's not even the case. But the point is, we deal with ideas that are always there.
You could say conditioning.
It's conditioning, but I won't say. I wouldn't put a level as a condition that necessarily shapes how you fundamentally are, but it can shape how you can on the surface behave.
Your ideas and stuff.
On how on the surface. I mean, simple things like, for example, why is it that we naturally, as men, would like to help a struggling woman with a suitcase and not care too much about a struggling man with a suitcase? It is. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. I'm saying these are fundamental, ingrained things that we don't even realize that are there. But they are there. And I think favoring someone based on nationality, race. I mean, I give one example myself, which I still struggle with to this day. To this day, I struggle with. If someone calls and they have a strong accent, my patience levels goes down. And I think to myself, look, it's not their fault that the English is not great. For many reasons, maybe they just reached here or not. That doesn't determine anything. But it's just that I am not either not used to having suffered with it or whatever the case may be. It's just these are things we have to always help or struggle with to refine ourselves and better ourselves. It's always going to be there. The issue is though, I would say just to conclude, the issue is though, are we going to make these random thoughts or ideas shape our fundamental behavior with other people, especially when it comes to the issue of dawah and the rest of it? But maybe Abdullah can give a closing word on that one.
No, that's it for me until the next session.
Okay, for your contribution. I think this issue is a huge issue. We just touched it, and hopefully in the next episode we can get a bit deeper on the topic and find some more solutions. So inshallah, thank for viewing, and inshallah we'll see you in the next episode.
Barakallahu fikum.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك